Hi, Suchadatta, your SST teacher. Once again to start with civics, political science as you say. And till now, we've been talking about democracy. Democracy in various parts of the world. We've been talking about US, UK, India, Belgium, Sri Lanka, happy situations, unhappy situations, but we have to actually understand now what comes out of democracy. In fact, when you have a democratic setup, are the people happy? Are they wanting more? Can they compare this government to the other forms of government do they have? What is it like? So, this is what we are going to see in this chapter as to is really a democratic government the best form of government in the world. But as ever, before we start with the chapter, we shall see the outcomes of democracy. Now here, the outcomes of democracy means we are going to see the new terms, and the new terms are, first of all, outcome. The word outcome. Here in this context, it means the result, the consequences, the effect that the country experiences because it is a democratic government. So, we are going to see in fact what actually is experienced by people because they are into a democratic setup. Well, the next one, characteristics of democracy. Democracy, whenever I relate this word, I just say it's a government of the people, by the people, for the people. Well, but democracy has certain characteristics which are common to all democracies in the world, and those are equality. Equality meaning all the citizens in the country feel equal. They feel that there is no discrimination on the basis of any kinds, religion, caste, language, region, everybody equal in the eyes of law. Then the dignity. Every person feels dignified, feels is an honorable member of that country. That's the dignity that democracy gives to all its citizens. Next, the decision. The decisions are not made by just a set of people or one person. They are made with the consent of almost the entire population of the country. Next, resolve conflicts. Whatever the conflicts are. Now, democracy doesn't mean that it is a kind of government wherein nobody is going to be unhappy, wherein nobody is going to have a conflict. Everybody will have some or the other conflict. So, in order to resolve that, in order to see that everybody reaches to a common platform, there is a very wonderful system wherein we vote, wherein we get elected, and this is how we resolve conflict. So, it's a beautiful setup, that is the characteristics of democracy in itself indicate that it's a government wherein we all would love to be. Next is alternatives form of democracy. Well, you are always looking for a change for betterment. And when you are looking for alternatives form of democracy, you could be thinking about a change in the democracy, but which could be of a better level. Now, these alternatives people have to decide with the changing time, with the changing situations, and democracy is always looking forward to new changes. Well, the next one, elements of democracy. Every government has certain things without which it cannot function. So, the eyes and the ears and the limbs of the democracy are, first of all, every democratic government needs to have a constitution. Most of the countries have written constitution, barring few which have unwritten ones, but all democratic countries need to have a constitution wherein all the laws are written in black and white, and if there is a confusion, you can consult the constitution and work accordingly. Well, next is elections. Nobody can think of democracy without elections. Supposing there were no elections in the country, then who would get elected, who would vote, and what kind of government would we have? Definitely not a democratic set of government. So, elections are required for actually having a true democracy in any country, or rather no elections, no democracy. Next, political parties. Now, political parties are as essential as elections. You need to have various choices of the candidates and what they shall do for us in future. And everybody needs to enjoy rights in order to be feeling like under a democratic setup. I continue with the rest of the terms in the next clipping. We've been talking about the new terms for the chapter Outcomes of Democracy. The next is monarchy. Now, the name suggests it's the rule of the monarch, rule of the king. This is in fact the oldest kind of governments that any country has ever experienced. It is said that either the wisest, the oldest, or the strongest became the king himself. Well, that's monarchy, and it has been continuing since then in many countries of the world, wherein all the powers are concentrated in the hands of one man who is called a king or a monarch. And sadly, to add to this is that his children become the next kings. It's a hereditary rule very often in a monarchical setup. Next, dignity. Well, this is very, very essential for all of us, for all human beings. You see, everybody needs to have an honorable rank in the society. You need to feel very, very privileged, honored, at par, equal with the rest of the society members, and that makes you feel dignified. A dignified person is a happy person. Well, the outcomes of democracy, the chapter itself. Now, what are the outcomes of democracy? The outcomes are everybody should have political rights, political equality, that is right to vote and right to get elected. Well, social equality, no discrimination on the basis of religion, caste, language or region. All society members equal, at par with each other. Next, economic equality. Economic equality, everybody has the right to join any kind of profession, to do any kind of business, is economic equality, plus that we see that there are not extremes in the society. Not that there are people who are very rich and very poor. The condition of haves and haves not should not be there in the democratic setup. Next, of course, is the dignity of a person. He has to feel respectable. Next, measures for democratic outcomes. How do you make people politically, socially, economically equal? Well, first thing is that the country needs to have elections, and not elections of the kind that there are a lot of people who are doing lot of wrongs in the election. There are only few people who can stand in the election. There are only few segments of the society who can vote. No, not required at all. For a democratic outcome, the measure, the first one is free and fair elections. That is, nobody is going to cheat anybody. Everybody is going to have one vote, and all of us, whether you or me, can get elected. Next, debates. We are going to actually talk about it, and this debate will actually come out in the form of a conclusion which is drawn. So, bullets not required, just debating. Then, right to information. Right to information means that all of us have what? We know what the government is doing, and we must know this so that there is a successful working of democracy. These are the outcomes of democracy. Well, I talk about it, the next terms which are difficult in the next clipping. Well, we've been talking about the various terms, and the next one is economic development. Economic development means when the growth of the economy of the country is stable, meaning to say that the things are going in a right manner as far as the economy is concerned. Only then you have economic development in the country. Economic development, in fact, is very, very essential for any country of the world. Next, transparency. Transparency, the word suggests that it is the right to examine the decision making of the government. That is, when we are unhappy about a situation, when we want to know exactly what the government is doing in any context, we should be able to know what is the stand of the government in that context. Well, transparency is very, very important, because only then the government will feel accountable. The government will actually be afraid of the public, because it will know that if they do something hanky-panky, if they do something wrong, they will easily get caught in the next elections. Next, accountable. Accountable, that is, all democratic governments in the world are accountable to the public who has elected them. They have to be accountable, you see. Otherwise, this system of electing and re-electing the candidates in a matter of 5 years, 4 years or 6 years, whatever is applicable in any country, they have to face that situation. So, accountable means you are responsible, you are answerable, you are a legitimate government. Answerable to whatever you are doing. You should be able to answer that I have done this because of this. Responsible, definitely. You are responsible to the people who have elected you and have given you that place to go and sit in the assembly. Legitimate, definitely. Legitimate because the people have elected you, so you are the legitimate government of the country. Poverty. Poverty is that situation when human beings are not able to get the required things that they should. Meaning to say, They lack in food, clothing, shelter. In fact, poverty is that condition when people do not have even 2 times meal. That is poverty. And poverty has to be eradicated. Poverty has to be wiped out for democracy. Because democracy needs to bring in economic equality, as I said. If there is poverty in the country, that's a failure to a democratic setup. Next, inequality. Inequality in any form is not acceptable to the people who live in democratic setup. They want equality politically, socially, economically, because inequality is no word in a democratic setup. Nobody should feel unequal in any context. That is what democracy all about. Well, I continue with the rest of the terms and I start with the chapter in the next clipping. Now, the next term which you must understand is measures to sustain democracy. What are those ingredients? What are those measures which can actually make democracy sustainable in a country? First of all, unity in diversity. Well, most of the countries of the world have people speaking different languages, different people of different religion, people of different caste, or some other differences that they have. So, democracy should be able to give them a common platform. There should be unity in the country despite the fact that there are diversities in the country. Well, the biggest example is India, wherein all the multicultural people live in India, but still we can boast of unity in diversity. Next, historical background of the country. Well, we can just not blindly have a democratic setup based on the fact that another country has this kind of setup. It should not be that I say because United Kingdom or United States of America has this setup of government, that is this democratic form of government, so I am going to blindly follow that. This is not acceptable because you have to see the historical background of your country. Next, we have tolerance. Well, if something happens in the country, people have to tolerate each other. Nobody should go in extremes. Need to become tolerant in order to have successful democracy. Next, nationalism and patriotism. Well, no country can sustain, leave alone democracy. No country as such can sustain unless the citizens are not nationalist and patriotic. You cannot have people who don't feel for their country. If I don't feel that I am an Indian, then what am I? Then do I expect a government which is a welfare government? Of course I can't. I need to have love for my motherland. I need to feel for my motherland in order to have true democracy. Next, peaceful coexistence. Let's not fight in the name of religion, caste, language. We need to give space to each other and have a peaceful, happy living. That's called peaceful coexistence. Next, non-alignment. Well, non-alignment means not to be aligned with any group or section in the world. That is, not to be with any superpower or any such organization which is dividing the world. And you all know that Nehru had given this forward, the policy of non-alignment. Next, international peace and understanding. Well, if I have a democratic setup at home, I am very happy, people are very happy, but I do not see that there is peace in the world. I do not contribute in the understanding of the world. Definitely, it's going to have a setback on the democratic setup of my country. Last but not the least, civil liberties. Civil liberties are, in fact, another term for the rights that we enjoy. Okay? India has 6 fundamental rights. Some other countries can have more than that, less than that, but basically civil liberties are those liberties which every individual of the world or the country needs to enjoy in order to become a true human being. Well, that's the end of all the terms, and I start with the chapter in the next clipping, and we shall first of all assess democracy.